President Joe Biden had a very busy Christmas Eve, signing 50 new bills into law as he wraps up his time in office and the second Trump administration prepares to move in. CBS's Katrina Kaufman has a look at some of the measures that are now law.
The bald eagle has captivated Americans from the birth of the United States, adorning everything from the presidential seal to the $1 bill. And yet it was not the nation's official bird until now.
That should have been done many years ago.
Preston Cook, a volunteer at the National Eagle Center, could not find any documentation formally designating the bald eagle status. He urged his congressman to do something about it. Congress passed the bill unanimously, and President Biden signed it into law Tuesday.
I'm so grateful to announce the introduction of the bipartisan Stop Institutional Child Abuse Act.
Reality TV star and hotel heiress Paris Hilton has spent 3 years lobbying lawmakers for more oversight of residential programs for troubled teens. Hilton, who says she was abused in such a facility, was on the Hill last Thursday to see Congress pass the measure with overwhelming bipartisan support.
I just had tears flooding down my face. I was just so excited.
And now, lawmakers convicted of some crimes will no longer be able to receive their congressional pension. The legislation was introduced the same day corruption charges were announced against then-Democratic Senator Bob Menendez. The president signed a total of 50 bills into law Christmas Eve as his time in the White House comes to a close, with President-elect Trump set to be sworn into office next month. Trump spent Christmas morning posting about a range of topics on social media, from urging the Senate to confirm his cabinet picks to amplifying a column critical of Biden's time in office. He also wished everyone a Merry Christmas. Katrina Kaufman, CBS News, the White House.
We're told President Biden spent the morning calling some members of each branch of the military stationed around the world, thanking them for their service as well as thanking their families.
You know how almost every day there's some shocking piece of news, some other totally inappropriate person has been appointed to a job or nominated for a job, or it's Kari Lake, or it's yet another relative, or somebody's, somebody else's father-in-law, or son-in-law has been appointed to a job. I think that's probably deliberate. You distract people, you put an enormous amount of news on the table, and you keep it going all the time. And that's a way of kind of dominating and running the media.
Hello and welcome to the Bulwark Podcast. I'm your host, Tim Miller. Couldn't be more delighted to be here today with a staff writer at The Atlantic. Her books include Autocracy, Inc., The Dictators Who Want to Run the World, and Twilight of Democracy, The Seductive Lure of Authoritarianism, as well as the Pulitzer Prize-winning Gulag, A History. It's Anne Applebaum. Welcome back, Anne. How you doing?
Fine. Thanks for having me back.
Fine. We're fine. We're here. We're doing fine. I've got to be more precise in that in the opening greetings, I think, given the nature of affairs. I want to start with the seductive lure of authoritarianism, because it's more seductive than maybe I'd even anticipated. Domestically, we've got a series of rich people who have pre-surrendered to the incoming regime. Bezos and Zuck have donated $1 million to the inauguration. Mark Benioff, who was a Resistance CEO for the first time around at Salesforce, went on Maria Bartiromo's show, Maria Bartiromo's Coup Hour, and said, I feel that when we elect a new politician, we have to absolutely support them. This is a moment where we are turning the page. It's an opportunity for a new chapter. You have, covered all of this from the European perspective. What's happening with our domestic oligarchs here?
One of the things that's happening is that this is the second time that Trump has won, and when you look at the pattern, whether it's Hugo Chavez or whether it's Viktor Orban, it's a loss and then a return that changes the politics. The having overcome the fact that he assaulted the Constitution, broke the law multiple times, whichever piece of it bothers you the most, he stole documents, he was a corrupt businessman, all those things we now know, and yet he's been reelected anyway. people are going to say, right, this guy has, it's not exactly magical powers, but he has some kind of staying ability that I didn't account for the first time. And, I better get along with him or else I'm in trouble. And that's actually, it's not unique to the United States. You can see it in other places that the person who broke the law and yet comes back to power, people are, I don't know if it's more afraid is really the right word. But they're more willing to say, right, we give up this. This is the kind of regime that we have. We better learn to live with it.
Yeah, more accommodating, maybe. I do wonder, like, the best spin you could put on this, right, is that these rich guys are saying, okay, 4 more years of this, maybe we can butter him up and feed on his ego and get some stuff out of it, and then we're done with this guy. That's probably their calculation, right? Obviously, some of us feel like the risks maybe are greater than that, but kind of how do you sort of assess, that and what the what may be a more effective way to deal with a aspiring soft autocrat would be?
So one of the mistakes that people are making is imagining that giving the state more power or giving the executive more power, including, effectively power without control or the ability to bend the law, that will somehow be good for business. This is a very seductive argument that I think actually a lot of the people around him do believe. Yes. Musk, Thiel, but maybe also Bezos and Zuckerberg. I don't know. They think that this kind of power that seems to be different from the first time, where, as I said, he has this support in a particular part of the business community. They think it'll be good for them. They could be right in the short term. Obviously Bezos is reckoning that all the things he wants to do, go to space or go to Mars or wherever, those things will be facilitated by a Trump administration that will loosen regulations or give him subsidies. Trump has been known to do that before. The mistake that they make is that, in the longer term, and I don't know, life is so accelerated right now that longer term could come faster than it used to. Almost always these kinds of regimes are really bad for business. And if you look around the world, you can see it. Hungary, which is the state that so many on the far right now admire as a model, is now, depending on how you count, either the second or third poorest country in Europe. The putting all the power in the hands of a few favored oligarchs, making the political system dependent on the whim of the leader, bending rules and undermining the rule of law actually made Hungary a terrible place to invest. It made it profoundly corrupt. All kinds of stories there. And I can see the same thing happening in the United States. If you have a fundamental undermining of our sense that the relationship between the government and business is fair, you will have a different attitude to investment and to business and so on. I can't tell you exactly how it will play out, sure. But it's dangerous. The U.S. works because we have, it's a lot narrower than it used to be, but some kind of culture of trust. People believe that contracts will be enforced. They think that courts are neutral, and if you've broken the law, you're in trouble, and if you haven't, you'll be vindicated. When people begin to lose that sense, it has a profoundly undermining effect on business and the economy as well. It's just that it'll take some time for people to see it.
The tough thing to figure out is who exactly are the naive businessmen that think that this is going to help them, and who are the ones that are on board with the dismantling of that system and the dismantling of that trust. And to that point, Peter Thiel, we know which side he's on. He was on with Piers Morgan the other day, and I just want to play one clip from that interview.
The ancien regime that is liberalism is really exhausted. The 1990s are over. The 20th century is over. The 2020 election was not a return to normalcy, but it was, in retrospect, a last stand for the ancien regime with its very ancien president, and I think that's kind of what's over.
So the ancien regime there, the liberal order is over. And it's, I think in Peter Thiel's mind, is going to be replaced by the autocratic order, maybe the techno-feudal order, I don't know, of him and Elon and Mark Andreessen with Donald Trump as their puppet. Just wondering your thoughts about that.
I think that is what they think. Interesting, ancien or old, as we say in English, is a word you could also apply to Donald Trump. There are
and to Peter Thiel, if you looked at his face, he's trying to pretend like for the YouTube viewers, he's trying to pretend like he is not part of the ancien, but he's looking pretty ancien too.
Right. I mean, he's, of course, a product of the United States of America and its educational system and its financial system and so on and on. So it's not like he represents something new, but that's a separate question. I do think that there are now, there is a part of the media, there is a part of the business community, there's a part of whatever you call it, the online world, that now believes we will transition to something different. And I think they do mean some kind of techno-oligarchic regime where ordinary people have less influence on politics. Peter Thiel has been talking for years about how, giving women the vote was a mistake, and the poor being allowed to have influence on politics means has negative implications for the state. And I think the reason I was talking about Trump being old is they think that they will control him and they will hasten the transition to that regime. I mean, this is not some kind of made up dystopian nightmare. I mean, this is what they've been saying. This is what Thiel has been saying. This is what Curtis Yarvin has been saying. This is what others have been saying. So, why shouldn't we believe them when that's what they say? What exactly that means and how it works, in practice, I don't know. I mean, we still do have a legal system. We still have a Congress. We still have courts. Most judges, federal judges, are not partisan in the sense that they will vote for a different kind of regime. I mean, some of them are conservative and some of them are more progressive, or whatever word you want to use, but they have different interpretations, different interpretations of the Constitution, but they still operate out of those interpretations. They still think the Constitution matters. I mean, there are a couple exceptions in Florida and elsewhere, but most of them do. And so there are a lot of, there will be a lot of systemic resistance or systemic hurdles that you will have to overcome before you can establish a system whereby some version of Musk and Thiel or whichever puppet they back, whether it's Trump or Vance, are actually controlling the country and have more ability to make decisions and more power than anybody else. But it's clearly what they want. It's clearly the direction they're hoping to go in.
Yeah, I guess I don't think Peter Thiel is listening to me, but I guess I would caution him. You don't really know what exactly is going to replace the current liberal order. Excuse me from being a defender of the status quo, but it was funny to me that later in that interview, Piers asked him about the Brian Thompson murder, and Peter was like, I've never seen a stutter. He had like 25 seconds of stuttering before he finally said, well, I think we should use words to settle our disputes. It's like, well, when the ancien liberal order gets overthrown, it might be a feudo techno oligarchy, but it might also be something else that they don't like. Anyway.
Sorry, just one more word on that. I mean, once the people understand that the country is run, in effect, by unelected billionaires, then whatever anti-elite sentiments they have will be directed at those unelected billionaires. And that you can see that happen in other countries too.
On the corruption front, we also had Trump in the Middle East. In our newsletter this morning, Bill Kristol and Andrew Egger write about how Trump's son Eric, the executive vice president of the Trump Organization, made a announcement about the unveiling of a new Trump Tower in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia. Yesterday, the New York Times wrote about the dividing line between Trump's family business interests and Trump's power. Eric Trump was in Abu Dhabi celebrating his dad's move to unleash crypto as the family helps launch and profit from a new crypto investment. Obviously, we know about Jared Kushner's investments in Saudi. I want to play a little bit from Chris Murphy and get your reaction to it.
There is no doubt that this administration's policy towards the Middle East is going to be compromised by the fact that they are making money off of the very people that they're sitting across the table from and supposedly having a conversation about the interests of the United States. I mean, it's just extraordinary that we have allowed for the normalization of Trump's financial empire to be woven into the statecraft of this country. All that matters is how much money he makes, how much money his family makes, and it comes at a cost to the rest of us.
So the idea of U.S. foreign policy is that U.S. foreign policy should, one way or another, benefit the United States of America. It should be good for American prosperity, security. It should be good for international security, which is in a more distanced way, but it's still good for us. The idea that American foreign policy would be conducted to benefit the Trump family isn't something that we've had in America before. Exactly. I mean, we could probably find some examples of corruption in foreign policy and people who made decisions that were good for business partners or something like that. But I don't think we've ever had a version of it that's so blatant and so open. The idea that the Trump children would be openly seeking to benefit from their father's decisions, the idea that that relationships between between the United States and whether it's Saudi Arabia or Turkey or India or anywhere else would be shaped in order to benefit a particular investment. Now, this level of corruption is brand new. It's not something we've had before. It's also, once again, it's something that, the effects of it are going to be felt immediately by ordinary Americans. This is maybe this is another piece of bad news, which is that people, I saw a version of this happen in Poland. When the government begins to do things that are in violation of the rule of law or of the Constitution, but they don't seem to affect ordinary people and people don't see it or feel it themselves, there isn't necessarily the reaction and the outrage that you would expect. And that's what I think you were getting from Chris Murphy. He was saying, why is this normalized? And the answer is that most people don't care. And we are going to discover in a really big way, I think, that most people don't care about this stuff. And that will be an unhappy discovery. But yeah, it's new. It's different. It's a different level from other kinds of a different level of corruption.
This is right. And Trump's insight on all of this was, if you just power through the bad press, the round of bad press or the initial investigation or attacks from the counterparty, eventually, and there's no impact on anyone's lives, then eventually people just get over it, right? I mean, this is related to Steve Bannon flood the zone with shit. That it's also just this notion of as a tabloid guy, he knows this. He went through the scandal cycles before. It's like if you survive it and get out the other side, then you can continue to press on. And like in the past, politicians had folded, when they would get New York Times investigations about their family business, right?
Yeah. But by the way, I think that's also part of what there's a deliberate aspect to what's happening now. You know how almost every day there's some shocking piece of news, some other totally inappropriate person has been appointed to a job or nominated for a job, or it's Carrie Lake, or it's yet another relative, or somebody's, somebody else's father-in-law, or son-in-law has been appointed to a job. I think that's probably deliberate. You distract people, you put an enormous amount of news on the table and you keep it going all the time. And that's a way of kind of dominating and running the media. And that's also not unique to the Trump family. I mean, and the Trump cronies and people around him. I mean, that's also a known tactic. You just keep going. Every day there's another shocking thing that people have to absorb, and it's been also directed at different groups. So there's the national security people are upset about one set of appointments, and health people are upset about RFK Jr. and a different set of people are upset about So there's you keep everybody divided and angry, and that's a tactic.
So I hadn't gotten to Tiffany's father-in-law, but since you mentioned it, I do feel like I should at least read the headline for people if they had missed it. Trump's Middle East advisor pick, who's Tiffany's father-in-law, is a small-time truck salesman. it's like a George Santos situation. Like he had acted like he was a billionaire deal maker, but he has like a tiny stake in an African truck company. Anyway, you mentioned Kari Lake. We have to get our chuckles at the absurdity of this when we can. I do want your take on this because Voice of America, which Trump had nominated her to run. For those of us, for domestic folks, might not just really even understand the remit or the importance of that. So I am curious your take on fake news, Kari Lake running the Voice of America potentially.
So Voice of America is one of a group of U.S.-funded foreign news services. There's RFE/RL, Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty. There's Cuban radio. There's an Arab language radio. There's a group of, they're called radios, but they're not really radios anymore. They're media properties. There's Radio Free Asia, which has, I think, or it used to be at least the most Uyghur language broadcasting of any outlet outside of China. They play a really important role they could play a more important role in countering Russian and Chinese propaganda outside of the United States. So there is an enormous effort to shape narratives and conversations in Africa that the Chinese invest in. They've actually invested billions and billions of dollars. Way more money than we spend on Radio Free Europe and all those media properties put together. The Russians have a huge investment in information campaigns of different kinds in Europe and Asia, elsewhere. One of the few tools that we have is Voice of America and those other properties, which are designed at least to put it's not so much they're not meant to be American propaganda. I'm sure sometimes that's what they are. But mainly they're designed to be, outlets that build trust because they report things that are true. They're meant to be, to contradict the Russian and Chinese messaging. They're meant to build different set of arguments, mostly, as I said, in third countries. They're most important in places where the U.S. and the democratic world are competing directly with the authoritarian world in narratives and in arguments. The idea that Kari Lake would be the head of Voice of America is absurd on many levels. She has no journalism experience. She has no public diplomacy experience. She's a liar.
She was a local TV anchor. So. Oh, right.
Okay. Well, she hasn't run, as far as I know, a large international media institution. She, and of course she's a liar. She's somebody who supported a false narrative about multiple elections, actually, Trump's elections, her own elections. And actually her anti-election sort of campaigns or her election denial campaigns in Arizona had a big effect, I think, on the culture of Arizona. I did a podcast last summer and we interviewed an Arizona election official whose life was essentially ruined. He was just a guy who said, Trump didn't win the election, and he was harassed and doxxed and his family was attacked. And, you can imagine what people go through if you're a Maricopa County election official and you live in a world in which Kari Lake dominates. So the idea that she would be somehow the spokesman for American values around the world and, fighting Chinese authoritarian propaganda in Africa is ludicrous. On top of that, last year, the Senate confirmed a board of it. There's an institution that governs all of these media properties. And there's a board. I know it's half Democrat, half Republican by law.
Yeah,
I think it's 3-3. And I think the Secretary of State is the fourth vote on it. The Senate confirmed that board, and actually that board is what decides who will be the next leader of these various institutions. The VOA has a current leader. It's somebody who was just appointed a few months ago, Mike Abramowitz, who used to be the leader of Freedom House, which is it's like a Cold War era democracy promotion organization that also did most of its work outside of the United States. So he's not by any means some kind of left wing or progressive figure. He's just somebody who's worked on democracy issues for a long time. So that board would have to agree that Kari Lake will replace him, and we'll see what it does.
I want to move to what's happening in Europe. I'm not that optimistic about the board. If Marco Rubio is the tying vote, I don't know. Maybe we'll have Kari Lake. It will be a good investment for the Russians, to having the head of the American VOA also being sympathetic to their messaging. The NATO Secretary General this week gave a speech. Mark Rutte issuing a warning, said among other things, we are not ready for what is coming our way. In 4 to 5 years, the Russia economy is on war footing. Talk about, obviously with your husband being an elected official in Poland. Talk about government official, in Poland. Talk to me about kind of the view from our NATO allies here, December 2024.
Okay, for clarity, I don't speak for my husband, who's the Polish foreign minister. I don't represent him or the great nation of Poland, in any way. I think what Rutte was saying is something that's becoming increasingly clear, which is that the Russian economy is now increasingly a war economy. It's built around and for the purpose of producing weapons, which is making it look a lot more like the Soviet economy, actually, from the 1970s, which is an interesting parallel and also shows where it could end up. But at the moment, they're building this weapons producing economy. They're putting a lot of, all their best technology and their best researchers and engineers and so on are all pushing in that direction. That's what they're doing now. And that means that for Putin to somehow reverse course or stop the war has a lot more consequences than people think. So what would happen to all that enormous investment? They would just stop it? I mean, I don't think so. What would happen to the hundreds of thousands of armed soldiers who are now in the field? Would Putin just bring them home and then they would go back to regular life? Is that something that's going to be good for him or healthy for Russia? I think what Rutte was saying, the NATO Secretary General, was that naivete about the ease with which you could get a deal or negotiate with Russia is unwarranted. I'm really worried because I hear both in Europe and in the US and in Ukraine, actually, a lot of people who do seem to believe that because Trump has said he wants a negotiation, that there will be one. I mean, I am happy to be proven wrong. There is no one who will be happier to hear that there's a real negotiation happening and that the war would end. It's been a misery for so many of my friends. It's a huge political and economic problem for everybody else in Europe. I really want the war to be over. Ukrainians have made clear that they will negotiate, and they've made that clear in public. They've also made it clear in more specific ways in private. They would be happy to do some kind of deal. Of course, they're not going to give up their sovereignty, and they're not going to allow the Russians to replace the current government with a pro-Russian government. There is right now, as we're speaking, no indication that the Russians want to negotiate at all. Again, maybe I'm going to be proven wrong, but they haven't said they wanted to. Whenever Putin is asked about it, he's repeated his goals for Ukraine, which include the removal of the government and its replacement with someone he approves of. There have been, sometimes the goal is Russia occupies and incorporates eastern Ukraine, creates a little fake state in the middle of Ukraine, and gives Western Ukraine, supposedly, this is what they say, not what anybody would want, to be divided up by other countries. So it's a recipe for the destruction of Ukraine. That's what Putin has said. He's never offered a vision of an alternative. He's built his economy around war and the need to continue war. His power base is also might depend on him continuing the war. He now has around him people who are dedicated to and are profiting from, because this is an oligarchic, corrupt economy, and are profiting from the continuation of the war and the construction of and the building of more weapons. So what Rutte was saying was that this is not a problem that has an instant or easy or short-term solution. Once you are a leader whose power and power inside the country and has all kinds of people dependent on you to continue fighting, it becomes very hard to stop for a lot of reasons. And so that was a warning.
Yeah, it's interesting. It is that conventional wisdom outside that some deal is coming, but it's now my colleague Bill Kristol, Michael Weiss, now you. This podcast is the home for skepticism of Putin's interest in a deal, because everybody has echoed your point of view on that. Let's be honest. What most people really want from the holidays is to see their favorite people more often. Favorite people, maybe not everybody, but you want to see your favorite people more often. That's why this year, the best gift you can give, besides a plane ticket for all your friends to some foreign country, is an Aura digital picture frame. Named the #1 digital photo frame by Wirecutter, Aura frames are incredibly smart and easy to use, allowing you to upload unlimited photos and videos directly from your phone to the frame. Plus, you can order the frame online and preload it with photos and videos using the Aura app, so it's ready to go right out of the box. We're going to be talking about Aura all week going into Christmas because, look, Christmas, you want to be able to bring a little joy into people's lives. And I don't know about you. I'm grinding right now. I'm on the present grind. I'm trying to come up with good ideas. I've got a couple good ideas, and then for some people, you're like, ugh, I'm struggling. If you're struggling with somebody, particularly if it's an aunt or a grandparent or somebody that you don't get to see enough, Aura digital frames are the answer. So, save on the perfect gift by visiting auraframes.com to get $35 off Aura's best-selling Carver matte frames by using promo code BULWARK at checkout. That's auraframes.com, promo code BULWARK. This deal is exclusive to listeners, so get yours now in time for the holidays. Terms and conditions apply. Hey, y'all, if you love this podcast and want to listen to all Bulwark podcasts ad-free, join Bulwark Plus today. You can click the link in this description. You'll get the best politics newsletter